I have no problem with looking at average students per section. I think it's actually a really good thing to do. I think it does get us closer to looking at demand, but I think we got to be careful in how we do it for a couple reasons. Now, I've mentioned one already, and that is the threshold. I'm going to come back to that one later. But something actually occurred to me while I was looking at this data for this spreadsheet. What I've done here is I've downloaded the 2017-2018 transfer average students per section data. Okay, so and then I sorted it in increasing order. So at the low end there, you've got music performance, Chinese, journalism. Those are the ones that are flagged red. That means they came in under the critical threshold. And then I've got French and Italian, German, theater arts, and so forth. Some of those are flagged yellow because they came in under the benchmark threshold. And then the ones that are color-coded black, they're in the black, which means they didn't trip any of the thresholds. As I was kind of downloading this, I was really taken by the far right data points. Those 3 data points out there are English, fine arts, and women's studies. And I thought that was so interesting. I'm like, how can women's studies, fine arts, English, how can these courses that I can barely find in the schedule have such high average students per section? So I did a little deep dive. I went back to German, which has an average students per section number of 11.44. And I took a look. I said, well, let's just see how many sections there are. So I went into Tableau, and here's what I saw. So you can see that when you look at the entire academic year, there are quite a few total students in German, more than are actually in women's studies over the entire year. Here's women's studies for 2017-2018. The reason the women's studies course average is so high is because there's only one section offered all year. So if you want to take that course, everybody waits and takes it right then, whenever it's offered, that one section. So 42 average students per section is a little bit misleading. It's one section and there were 42 students in it once. When you look at German, there's actually more than 42 total students worth of enrollment over the entire year. But out of necessity, you can't have them all in one class. They have to be spread because you have to offer German 1, German 101, German 102, German 103, 201, 202, 203. It's apples, oranges, so to speak. The average student per section threshold that we currently use doesn't tease out that difference. It simply puts women's studies and German along the same threshold. And that threshold is, you can see it right there, 15 students per section for the benchmark threshold and 7.5 for the critical threshold. So I think that's, again, one of the problems with using an absolute threshold to compare all programs to. When you base that threshold measure, or those threshold measures, on an absolute average, clearly the ones like the women's studies course that are so very high are never going to get anywhere near it. And the ones like music performance, journalism, Chinese, are never going to get near it either, but on the wrong side. They're going to be always below. That's, again, one of the concerns. And I think using control charts, like I kind of spelled out in the last video, will take care of that. Another kind of problem that will be resolved with using the control chart idea, if you look closely at the sets of courses over here, you'll notice that some are grouped together. Now, some of them make sense. For example, physics, GS 104 and GS 107. It makes sense to group those together because physics, GS 104 is general science physics and GS 107 is general science astronomy. And those are logically grouped together because they overlap quite a bit. Chemistry, GS 105. Again, that makes perfect sense because GS 105 is general science chemistry. Geology and GS 106. That makes sense. GS 106 is geology. GS 108 is oceanography. I have no idea why oceanography is grouped in with geology. But if you look at it from a control chart perspective, let it stand on its own merit. Same thing with French and Italian up top. Granted, they're both Romance languages. I totally get that. But why put them together? They're the only languages that are grouped together. Spanish, German, those are all teased out. Why would you have French and Italian grouped together? Have them stand on their own and look at the control chart to actually see what's going on. So Again, just one more time, the idea of an absolute threshold of students per section is, just like cost over revenue, going to inadvertently flag these necessarily small sections over and over again, unfairly. Okay, let's wrap up.